Would you travel forward in time if you could be a time traveler, or would you travel backward? I guess it depends on your motivations, right? We want to travel backward in time because we are curious about how things really happened, or maybe we want to right certain wrongs in the past. Or maybe we want to go to the future because we have a curiosity about what's going to happen. Maybe that's why I'm more interested in history. And how about this? Have you ever felt this way? Have you ever felt like I wasn't born at the right time? I should have been born in, say, Jane Austen's England, or I should have been born during World War II, or maybe if you're a little bit demented, you'd think, I want to live in the Middle Ages. We don't have smell-o-vision, and the Middle Ages would smell bad. The first thing you would notice is, oh my gosh, I can't stand it. Look, I feel out of place in my era too. So maybe there's a way we could explore this a little bit together. I'm Liam. I'm a retired history professor and I love books. I love book clubs and I love history. And today I'm going to travel backward in time. And to do that, especially now in the summertime, because it's so much fun, we can binge watch certain things. So, what do you binge watch if you're a history guy? Not the History Channel. That just isn't real. But there is some stuff that I like to binge watch. And I know you probably do too. Some people that I've talked to love to binge watch Frasier. I think Frasier's really funny. But there are a couple of programs that I binge watch and I can talk my wife into doing it with me. And I can leave my history hat on. I guess that's what I'm saying as I binge watch. And I don't think that's to assuage my guilt for wasting time, but maybe it is. And I'd like to invite you to join me in my history binge watch today. Now, I got to give a disclaimer. It would be great to show you clips of the program that I binge watch, but there are copyright problems. But listen, we'll just talk. I'll give you some things to think about, and you can go watch the YouTube of these old programs yourself. The program that I'm going to talk about today may surprise you, but as a history guy, it really intrigues me. I'll offer three observations. I don't believe that I was born in the wrong era. I think I'm supposed to be where I am now. In fact, try to imagine being born in another era, and I can't. I always come up with objections, even to the best of times. But I can understand why people long for other times. There's a sense in which things are so hard now we want to escape, or maybe we've experienced so much pain in our life, maybe even abuse. We think, I wish I could go to a different time. Maybe things would be better. Maybe there would be less disappointment. Entertainment is a great thing because it can transform us to different eras, transported to eras that don't even exist. There's fantasy. And then there are these pictures that programs give us of the past where they talk about history and they try to show us the way things looked historically. They fall short. I think of programs like the old MASH series. It was supposed to picture the Korean War, but really it was about the Vietnam era. Another one is that old comedy, Hogan's Heroes. And you say, Hogan's Heroes? Does it tell you about history? It's a farce. Yeah, supposedly in a German concentration camp, but it was more about the 1960s. But I'm not even talking about those. I'm talking about programs that were made in a certain historical time, and they really speak to that historical time and give us a great picture of what it was like. And I think of a couple of programs like this. One is the old comedy program, Barney Miller, that was set in a police station in New York. You know what? It was probably one of the most realistic depictions of what life was like in a police station in New York of any program, any drama, any documentary I've ever seen about that subject. It's just a great, great show. I'm not talking about Barney Miller today. Maybe I'll do that on a future video. But there's another program that I think is ideal for this. And that's the one I want to really talk about today. One that was made in the 1950s. And I think it's one of the best programs ever made for understanding something about the culture. It shows us not only everyday culture, but also celebrity culture in the 1950s. There's a lot of bias in popular culture about the 1950s. I was born in the 50s. The 1950s was a time of prosperity after World War II, but it was also a time of conformity in society. And there were gender roles. Everything had to be rosy and work out. It's still a time of segregation. Then we encounter this program called What's My Line? The one I want to talk about. What's My Line embraces some of those cultural stereotypes we have about the 1950s, but then it surprises us in a few ways. Now, a little background on What's My Line. It was created by the famous game show duo of Mark Goodson and Bill Todman and came out in 1950. And it played all through the 50s and right up until 1967. They had a panel of kind of not high level celebrities, but they had smart celebrities. A panel where they guessed contestants' occupations based on simple yes or no answers. If you were a contestant, you came on, answered yes or no questions. And if you were able to give the panel 10 no's, then you won the game. If the panel guessed before there were 10 no's, then they won. No big deal. It wasn't a lot of money that you won. And the panel didn't get anything, but everybody loved it. They couldn't get enough of it. The early 50s only shown in a few markets, and it spread like wildfire. It was one of the most highly rated shows on CBS. And those panelists became well known. They had a famous mystery guest who came on as a contestant as well. And because they were famous and all the panelists would know them, the panelists were blindfolded. The success of the program is attributed to formidable yet likable panelists who created a family-like atmosphere. Just to give you a personal idea, my wife and I, we've seen them all, and we watch them again and again. We feel like those people are our family. We feel like we'd like to sit on the panel with them. We feel like we'd like to be contestants that foil them after 10 guesses. And maybe we're mentally ill, but that's our response to it. I guess it speaks to our need for a family and coming to know something so well that we identify with them as family members. But that was the success of the show back in the 50s when people could only get it once a week. They'd watch it on late Sunday nights. It's amazing. There is a historical perspective that it also gives us about the 1950s. Let me exhort you. Historians would say, don't judge other eras by your own. These people do things that seem funny to us today, but it didn't seem funny to them, and they didn't think about them very deeply. Just like today, there are things that we don't think about very deeply, but future generations may look back at us and say, wow, what they did is weird, or worse, what they do is really wrong. You'll see some of those things in What's My Line. C.S. Lewis called the practice of judging other generations by our own generation's standard chronological snobbery. It's an invalid argument, he says, and that's the name of it, the logical fallacy. So here are 3 takeaways from What's My Line. Number 1, the first thing that you'll notice when you watch the show for the first time is the formal dress and the gender norms. In the 1950s, people dressed very differently than we dress today. We would say we dress in a casual way. They dressed in a much more formal way. So the women's wore gowns on the show, and the celebrity men might even wear tuxedos, at least suits and ties. They would say we dress up in our Sunday best because we're appearing on television in America on Sunday night. Another thing that you'll notice is that the women on the show get compliments for their physical appearance all the time. You'll also notice that the men in their compliments almost seem like they're leering to us. There are both positive and problematic aspects to this. They wanted to use compliments about physical appearance as encouragement. Also, a lot of the positive compliments objectify women. What you're really important for is to get dinner, but you also need to look pleasant and this underlying sexual aspect of the whole thing. My second takeaway has to do with how the audience behaves and the stereotypes that are promoted on the show. You'll be shocked right away when a pretty woman comes on the show, you'll hear whistles from the audience. John Charles Daly will come out and hold the hand of the contestant and say, "What is your name?" And then he'll ask, "Are you Miss or Mrs.?" We would never do that today. And the whistles he would address by saying, my, spring has come early, hasn't it?" You might want to slug some guy who whistles at a pretty woman who goes by because we feel that's objectifying behavior. But don't judge the 50s on that. There are other problematic things about the 1950s that you'll notice on the show as well. For example, very few blacks, not no African Americans, but few. So very white in terms of the contestants, even in terms of the celebrities. It wasn't unusual, even for members of the panel, to mock people who had unusual appearances or non-conforming contestants. For example, there's a particular show where Jerry Lewis, remember Jerry Lewis? He's a panelist on the show, and a woman comes on as a contestant who happens to be very overweight. And when she reveals her occupation, the panel has been fooled. They got 10 no's. And she says that she sells pills that help take off weight. Jerry Lewis makes fun of her weight, and the audience laughs. And the contestant sort of hangs her head. So she's embarrassed. There's also something the audience thinks is really funny when a male nurse comes on. 6'6", he's in the Army. They think it's just really funny that this tall man is somehow a male nurse. And the panel doesn't get it right. There are multiple episodes where lady barbers come on the show. Now, here's takeaway 3. The big surprise is that the women panelists on the show are respected and commended for their careers. Yes, they had careers. They didn't just stay at home. The women panelists are Dorothy Kilgallen, who was a columnist and journalist, and Arlene Francis, who was an actress. Anyway, they are, in my opinion, hands down, the 2 best panelists on the show. They play better than anybody else. And if you watch these as a binge watch, you'll notice how amazing these women really are. So they are smart women, very smart. Nevertheless, some cultural assumptions about women persisted, even with the women panelists. For example, they'll talk about, is this something that we would normally expect a man to do? And they might say yes or no. And then when they're talking about a product, they'll talk about, Is this something that a woman might use more than a man if it was a product that would be found in the kitchen? Dorothy Kilgallen and Arlene Francis joined Bennett Cerf as the longest tenured panelists on the show. Historians can use TV as a lens to understand complex social realities about other eras. What's My Line's a great example of a show that we can watch and pick up some cultural clues. It's not hard to do, and maybe learn a little bit about what it might have been like to have lived in the 1950s. I think life was a little bit simpler than it is now. And people only had so much money to spend. And there was probably a greater percentage of people's budgets that were spent on clothes because it was so important. The contestants tell us about what they do and finding out what they do, how average people viewed life and how they felt about their occupations and how those interacted with other people in everyday life. See if you don't find that true when you watch What's My Line. So remember to comment on what you see. Dorothy Kilgallen is attractive, but not attractive for how she looks. I always find myself drawn to Dorothy because she was so smart. I thought, wow, I'd love to have a conversation with her. What would you watch and read that would tell you something about that era and cause you to immerse yourself in it and learn more about it? I encourage you to comment, like, and subscribe. If you like the content of this video, check out these other videos on your screen. And here's an easy way for you to subscribe as well. Thanks for watching today, and happy summer and happy binge watching.